Rules and Regs will now come to order, and want to welcome committee members. We do have a substitution today for Senator Faust Godot, who has another joint committee that meets at exactly the same time as this joint committee. So she is serving there, and in her stead, we have Senator Reddy joining us. So welcome, Senator. Glad to have you with us here today. And also joining us online are committee members Representative Sutton, Representative Wassinger, Representative Sawyer, and Senator Tyson. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for those in the committee meeting room joining us. Thank you for staff for being here as well, and those following along online. And our first order of business is approval of meeting minutes. So committee, you have those in your committee documents for our last two meetings, which were January 19th, 2024 and February 2nd, 2024. So if you'll take a look at those, and I'll entertain discussion or a motion.
Madam Chair, this is Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Representative. Go ahead.
I move that we approve the minutes from the last two meetings as written.
Thank you. Is there a second? Well, I'll go ahead and second that then. And committee, then, you all have heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Thank you, committee. And next, we will then have our first conferee. We are hearing from the Department of Labor, Division of Workers' Compensation. And we have Jose Castillo, Assistant Director of Workers' Compensation. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee. And make sure your microphone is on.
Good morning.
There we go. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jose Castillo. I'm the Assistant Director for the Division of Workers' Compensation at the Department of Labor. With me also today is Jacina Washington. She works in the medical unit at the division. In addition, we have Jeff King, the Director of Workers' Compensation, and Julie Mangini, which is the Government Affairs Director. Okay. Today we're here on KAR 51-9-7. The regulation is authorized by and implements KSA 44510I. This regulation adopts by reference the 2024 Schedule of Medical Fees, which establishes the fees for medical and hospital services through the utilization of maximum medical fee schedules. The Division of Workers' Compensation, in accordance to the statute, needs to review the medical fees every 2 years and update it as necessary. The purpose of the fee schedule attempts to balance the needs of ensuring access to physicians for injured workers while keeping costs at a reasonable level for Kansas employers. In preparing the medical fee schedule, we do consult with an advisory panel. The advisory panel members are listed in the written testimony. In addition to that, we do gather data from the National Council on Compensation Insurance, which provides us data from surrounding areas or region for states that have medical fee schedules. We will continue to use the resource-based relative value system, which was originally developed for Medicare as a source of the CPT unit values, which is what establishes the fees utilizing the CPT codes. In order to maintain the current level of services, the primary changes to the fee schedule are an increase of the maximum allowable reimbursements for all anesthesia and surgical services by 3%, and inpatient peer groups increased by $200. The National Council on Compensation Insurance has done an analysis on our proposed 2024 changes and estimates that the overall impact would be 0.3% on the workers' compensation system in Kansas. I'll now stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Castillo, I thought I had reviewed these materials carefully, and apparently I didn't, because I think you made some reference to written testimony that listed the names of the members of the committee.
Yes, there should be an outline on the, I don't know if you received the written testimony. The members, there's a 12-member advisory panel.
Okay, before you go any further, we need to find out if we have your written testimony, because it was not in the materials, so far as I can tell, that I received from Legislative Research.
I think it was in a separate packet.
Well, that's always possible, that there might be a packet that I did not see.
But I've combined all mine together now, so I don't recall where that would have been.
All right, if other people have it, just so long that it's of record, I just want to make sure. And I think I know who most of the people on the panel are. Thank you. I'm sorry to have interrupted the proceedings.
I'm not sure that the written testimony contains the information you're looking for. You're looking for the persons on the panel?
I think that is what our conferee made reference to, that the names, did I understand you correctly, Mr. Assistant Director?
Yes, they do list them. It's, I can read them if you want me to go ahead and read them.
Madam Chair?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, the panel is made up of representatives from the Commissioner of Insurance, the Kansas Medical Society, the Kansas Association of Osteopath Medicine, Kansas Hospital Association, Kansas Chiropractic Association, Kansas Physical Therapy Association, Kansas Occupational Therapy Association, and 5 members appointed by the Secretary. Of the members appointed by the Secretary, 2 are employer representatives recommended by the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and 2 are representatives of employees recommended by the AFL-CIO. And 1 of the representatives is a vocational rehabilitation services.
I appreciate that answer. It just sounds to me like they've consulted a broad range of people in preparing these fees, and I just want to make sure that was the case. Thank you.
I agree that was helpful information to have read into the record here today, so appreciate that. Any other questions for the Deputy Director? Or I'm sorry, the Assistant Director.
Yeah, that's in the statutory, that's what the title is.
Okay, great. Not seeing any, then thank you very much. And we will close the hearing on the Department of Labor, KAR 51-9-7 then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony and for appearing in committee today. And before we got started, I wanted to mention, and hadn't, that the committee here today, we do hear and review regulations, but we don't have authority to approve or reject or amend. So it's kind of a look at the regulations, but without the authority to do those things that a standing committee might have the ability to do rather than a joint committee. So just wanted to help clear that up because sometimes it's confusing as people are following along online. Next, then, we will hear from the State Board of...
Madam Chair, may I interrupt?
Yes, sorry, Representative Wassinger, go ahead.
I did, are the representatives still there from the Department of Labor?
Hold on, they are. Could you... Thank you. I didn't see that a hand was raised. If our IT staff...
I didn't.
Oh, no hand raised. Okay, go ahead. We have, I think, a follow-up question for the Assistant Director, Mr. Castillo. If you'll come back to the podium. Thank you. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Representative Wassinger.
You have written down here that every 2 years you have to update your regulations, and it says that the last time you updated them was on March of 2019, and now it's May, April, May of 2024. Is there a reason why they weren't updated in the time frame that you said they had to be?
Yeah, during the pandemic and stuff, we did review it, and there wasn't much changes. The NCCI, what they do is they take data from the surrounding states that have medical fee schedules, and we look, well, they're looking at Oklahoma, Nebraska, New Mexico, Arkansas. Missouri does not have a fee schedule.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We have further questions. Senator Francisco, and then Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought I heard the statement being that they were asked to review every 2 years, and then if there's no changes, there would be no reason to do that. So, thank you.
And
If you'll stand at ease for just a moment, I think we have a question from Representative Penn.
thank you for your testimony today, Mr. Secretary. I was just wondering, was there an economic impact statement? I was looking through my packet associated with the fee structure.
Yes, we do have one. I'm not sure whether it was with the packet or not.
Okay.
But we can provide it if you need
Please
it.
do, Madam Chair, if that's amenable. Thank you.
Oh, gosh, it says an estimate of the total annual implementation and compliance costs that are reasonably expected to be incurred by or passed along to businesses, local governments, or members of the public. And the economic impact statement says that the total annual costs are $1.5 million. Do you see that? Okay. Do you have questions? And is that an annual ongoing 1.5 million, or?
Yes.
So each year 1.5 million because the fees have been increased?
And that's an estimate that we received from the NCCI, which is the National Council on Compensation Insurance.
Thank you. Committee, other questions? Not seeing any, then thank you for the second time for being here today and providing your testimony. We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, committee, we will now move on to the State Board of Mortuary Arts and hear from, I believe, J.W. Carey, Executive Secretary. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, Committee. My name is J.W. Carey. I am the Executive Secretary of the Kansas State Board of Mortuary Arts.
Can you make sure you speak into the microphone? Just it's hard to hear online.
I'm sorry, is that better?
Is it on?
I've got a blue light.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
I've been all over the state this week talking to funeral directors and embalmers, and so maybe my voice is going out. I apologize. But today I'm here to talk to you about the proposed changes to KAR 634-1, which is payment of fees. I'd like everybody here on the committee to note that the KSBMA has not changed its fees since 2011. This is a time span of 13 years where the fees have remained static. And due to the lack of the previous fee increases during this 13-year period, of course, expenditures, everyday expenditure, inflation, and the passing of legislation last year, namely Senate Bill 66, has provided a need for the board to increase their fees. We are going to have to comply with a data management system that is basically we're in the Excel platform option through OITS, and this just first year annual cost is going to be over $9,000 with probably a $550 subsequent year increase per use. And with that, in the matter of time, I'll stand in question.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Not seeing any, then thank you very much for your appearance today and for your testimony. Appreciate it. And for helping keeping us on time. Appreciate that. So, with that then, committee, we will next hear from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. Tom Stiles, Director, Bureau of Water. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
The storage of hydrocarbons in salt caverns. That ranges anywhere from gasoline, butane, to crude oil. The proposal, the regulations, represent recognition of advancements in technology since the early days of storing these products in our salt caverns, and the advancement of that technology to provide alternative means of ascertaining whether or not the conditions of those caverns remain safe and that the overall practices are operating as well. That imbibes a sense of flexibility in the traditional methods and tests that we've had the facilities and companies employ to guarantee compliance. Utilization of core sampling, analysis of those cores, and then subsequent modeling has allowed us and the companies to evaluate the integrity of the caverns and sometimes allow for those caverns to expand beyond the regulatory spatial limits that have up to this point been defined within the regulations. This thereby extends the operational life of the caverns. That saves the companies money. The companies view these salt caverns as real assets that they want to try to maintain for the long term and long range of the operation of their respective facilities. We see a reduction of potential cost and resources for drilling and mining out additional caverns as a result of this, and we see lower risk to the existing infrastructure utilizing the wells and storage caverns to place this product there. By refining and revising the definitions in Article 45 to include crude oil, and because the procedures and requirements under the 45B, the crude oil regulations, are the same as those of 45, we thereby have the freedom to revoke regulation chapter or Article 45B. Well, we have vetted these with the industry over a number of years. It's been a constant topic and subject of work sessions with the industry, really in serious earnestness. And since 2018, we have a public hearing scheduled May 16th. And we've had these proposed regulations reviewed by EPA, and they provided no additional comment to us. We view these regulations, again, as creating more opportunity for companies to utilize more flexible methods, less intrusive methods. That will result ultimately in cost savings to the industry, but maintain our role as overseeing to make sure that the operations are continue to be conducted in a safe manner. We also now will utilize the permitting process, and we'll issue permits for these facilities every 10 years. That permit becomes the centerpiece of our work with those companies and those facilities to customize what is happening there and customize the operations and the features of that facility so we have a up-to-date contemporary understanding of what is being done in the name of hydrocarbon storage there. This is in the face of more ongoing initiatives. You're looking at salt caverns as a vehicle for a variety of storage initiatives that range anywhere from compressed air to hydrogen, potential emplacement of biosolids and PFAS, and it requires us to have the most up-to-date information possible. And again, we view that, again, utilizing the permitting process will be the most efficient means of us helping the companies remain in compliance with state law. For the sake of time, I'd be happy to stand for questions from the committee and work through any of the regs that the committee has questions regarding.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any request for the conferee to kind of go more in detail one by one on these, or are we, we have Representative Wassinger has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at this and thinking these fee increases are really high from for example, from 10,000 to 50,000, and I don't see any instance of where it affects businesses. Back in your economic impact study, it says there's zero impact to businesses, and I would say a jump from 10,000 to well, I said 50, 30,000 would be a rather large jump. Can you explain to me about that?
Really, the only potential cost increase to the industries will be in every decade, every 10 years, the reissuance of the permit for each facility. We estimated in consultation with the industry, that would be $3,000. So taking their 4 companies with 10 facilities, that's 30,000. But otherwise, there are no fee increases there. The fees that are for the facilities and the wells were established in 2003. They have not been changed, and these regulations do not change them as well. So the cost savings come about in terms of the operational activities that go on to basically conduct monitoring and compliance assurance that the integrity of their facilities remain intact and that the caverns that they place their product in is also tight, doesn't represent a loss of that product nor any potential damage to the surrounding environment. But Representative, there are no fee increases associated with this, and taken across the board in terms of the cost savings, in terms of the flexibility we're providing the company against the every 10 years a $3,000 bill for a consultant to revise and reissue the permit. We view this as a positive for the companies.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a question. Well, I guess it is a question. When you say the permit every 10 years, that ranges approximately 10,000 to 30,000. That doesn't, what I'm hearing you say is it doesn't mean they're increasing from 10 to 30. That's the range of where they are at, and that's not changing.
No, well, and again, that 10 to 30,000 depends on the facility, it depends on the complexity and the features that are present in there, that it's not probably a uniform 3,000. That 3,000 per facility was essentially the average across the 10 facilities we have there. Some are much more complex than others that are somewhat simplified. So it does, in fact, represent the potential range of consultant costs that the companies would have to do every 10 years to gain a reissued permit.
Thank you. So it's a range, not so much an increase. Thank you very much.
There are no increases other than that.
Thank you. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Stiles, thank you for being here. So there is legislation on these underground hydrocarbon storage areas that's being considered in the current session?
It's actually regarding the underground injection control Class 1 wells. Now, all 4 of these companies and their 10 facilities not only have underground hydrocarbon storage, which are governed by the regs in front of you, but the legislation that you refer to in regard to the Class 1 wells that are under the underground injection control and the potential introduction of fees to that. All 4 of those companies and their 10 facilities not only are hydrocarbon storage facilities, but because they deal with brine, and sometimes they have to dispose of the brine, they utilize a Class 1 well as well. Those 4 companies that support that legislation, because up to this point in time, the fees that have been generated by these 4 companies basically support the entire geologic programs we have within the Bureau, which includes the underground injection control. Those fees that you refer to in the pending legislation would broaden out the contributions from the other Class 1 facilities across there, aside from these hydrocarbon storage facilities, to basically lessen the burden on the companies that are represented here and are governed by these regulations.
So thank you. I'm hearing not for the same permits, but there is legislation pending that could have an effect on these same companies that would reduce, that actually calls for reducing their fees.
Correct. Our dialogue with them and their support for the legislation comes so that they view the legislation as a relief mechanism to their fee structure.
Thank you. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know, Madam Chair, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. Are we at 2845-3A, or can we discuss that at this point?
Sure, if you have specific questions about a specific regulation, or would the committee prefer that we go one by one through the regulations? And
They seem to be voluminous, so.
I'm hearing no, but we can if we have specific questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
But yes, Representative Penn, if you have a specific question, please.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Proceed.
And thank you for your testimony here today, sir. Where it talks about the permit required, it looks like the stricken language says that no person can operate, and I'll leave my colleagues to take a look at that. But the replacement language says that no person shall construct or operate a storage facility, storage well, or cavern, brine pond without first obtaining a facility permit or permit modification issued by the Secretary. And then it goes into paragraph B for the next added language. It looks like that the stricken language that you have here, sir, takes out all of the requirements that would be there that an applicant or the industry would have to obtain a variance, and it looks like there's not that possibility left for the industry to apply for that with the new language if it's left to stand. Can you explain that to me, please?
All right. The purpose of 3A is to basically create the situation where instead of permitting each little feature associated with the facilities, everything is governed by a facility permit. That would include their wells, their caverns for storage, and their brine ponds utilize the whole brine that displaces the product as they move product in and out of the marketplace. So that permit facility basically is a huge umbrella that governs all the requirements from that. All subsequent regulations behind 3A basically lay out, here are the requirements for looking at the wells, here's what's required for evaluating the caverns, here's what you have to look at to maintain the integrity of the brine ponds you utilize to prevent them from seeping and introducing brine into the environment. So it is a complete overhaul of the regulations, combining them into, at the end of the day, with these regulations in place, we'll have 10 permits, all associated with each of those 10 facilities out there. But within the permits, there'll be very detailed breakout of here are all the expectations, all the features present at each of those facilities. And those are all governed by all the subsequent regs that follow in behind 3A.
Thank you. Committee, further questions? I do have one. Would you let everyone know when the public hearing will be conducted on these rules and regulations?
May 16th of this year at KDHE's offices.
May 16th at 10 a.m. at KDHE offices. And then if someone wanted to submit some written comments or sign up and come speak, how would they do that?
We have it available, the information available online for them to do so. And we have reached out to, of course, the companies who have been engaged in this, as well as then the League of Municipalities, the Association of Counties, the Association of School Boards, as we typically have to do relative to the regulations. But we will put it out in the Kansas Register as to announce that public hearing at least 30 days ahead of the hearing, and we'll leave the record open probably for 30 days thereafter.
And could you tell the public what the name of the website is if they're looking for it?
I can get you the linkage and give it to you subsequently, but it would be tied into KDHE's homepage and within water.
And could you tell us what the KDHE homepage is for those who might be looking for it?
It's always a challenge to come up with what that link is, but generally,
I think we have a phone a friend right here who can help out. So go ahead and please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. It appears the KDHE web address is www.kdhe.ks.gov. And I'll also note that when you're on the home page, if you look on, there's a water, actually, I'm sorry, on the homepage of KDHE itself, there should be a water link on the left side, I believe. And if not, then it is, there should be an environment link you can go to and then go to water from there.
Thank you, appreciate that. Sometimes it is very helpful to have directly what the website is, so appreciate us getting that information out there. Committee, any other questions? Not seeing any, then thank you very much for your testimony today and for appearing in committee. And while we're on it, I didn't get a chance to ask State Board of Mortuary Arts when their public hearing is either, if research could let the public know that as well, and how to submit testimony and sign up if you want to speak at the public hearing. Yes, Senator Francisco.
To add to our thanks, I would also like to say thank you for all the work that the Kansas Department of Health and Environment did putting together these regulations. We have heard in our Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee over the years about this program. We know how important it is in terms of water quality, and appreciate all that they've done. And this storage issue is one that I do believe is going to be more important in the future to so many of our industries.
Thank you. And then if we have that information for the State Board of Mortuary Arts.
Yes, Madam Chair. Jill Shelley, Legislative Research. The public hearing will be conducted on Thursday, April 11th at noon in the Senate room in the lobby level of the Jayhawk Tower building, which is 700 Southwest Jackson. The register notice was published in the Kansas Register in January. And parties may submit written comments prior to the hearing to the Kansas State Board of Mortuary Arts at 700 Southwest Jackson, Suite 904 in Topeka, 66603, or by email to jw.carey@ks.gov.
Thank you. And could you give the address for the Department of Health and Environment? We said it was May 16th at 10 a.m., but we didn't also say, it looks like it's the Azure Conference Room, 4th floor, Curtis State Office Building, 1000 Southwest Jackson, Topeka, Kansas, for the KDHE meeting. And then just to be thorough, if we could, the Department of Labor, Division of Workers' Compensation, if the public wants to submit comments and or provide in-person or virtual testimony. I don't know if they do virtual testimony at the public hearings, but if you could provide that information as well before we move on, since we're actually ahead of schedule.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. So according to the notice that was published in the Register, the Division of Workers' Comp, as you had stated, was within the Department of Labor. Their office is 401 Southwest Topeka Boulevard, Suite 2, Topeka, Kansas. And it looks like written comments prior to the hearing can be submitted to Mr. Castillo at jose.castillo@ks.gov. And I guess I didn't note the date on that. Tuesday, April 9th at 2 p.m. In their board hearing room.
And that's 401 Southwest Topeka Boulevard in Topeka. And Jose Castillo is JOSE dot, his email address, jose.castillo, CASTILLO@ks.gov. Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, then we are ready for the We are then ready to hear from the Kansas State Department of Education, R. Scott Gordon, General Counsel. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Scott Gordon. I am General Counsel for the Kansas State Department of Education. And before I forget to cover all the information that you just covered for the other committees, notice of our public hearing has been published in the Kansas Register. It will be on the agency website homepage if it isn't there already. The hearing is going to be held during the May meeting of the Kansas State Board of Education, and anyone that wishes to submit written testimony, they may do so by emailing the secretary to the State Board of Education. All of that information will be, if it's not already on there, because we've had a few public hearings lately, so I didn't want to confuse them, it will be very soon.
Can you just quickly give us an email address for folks to submit?
And I apologize, Deborah, if I get your email address wrong. It's D. Bremer, so DBR EMER, at ksde.org.
Thank you, appreciate it.
What you have in front of you is the result of a multi-year task force that was convened by the former chair of the Kansas State Board of Education. The graduation task force was made up of citizens, business leaders, parents, students, teachers, some of the past teachers of the year or members of the Teacher of the Year committee, other elected officials besides state board members, superintendents, principals, teachers. There was a variety of people on this particular task force. And they were charged with reviewing the graduation requirements that have been in place since, I believe, 2004 or 2005 from the Kansas State Board of Education. 2005. The requirements that are established by the State Board of Education are the minimum requirements that an accredited school district must impose or require of their own students. The State Board has set for years a minimum of 21 credits for a high school student to graduate. As of 2020, and I can say this because we know going into the COVID years, there wasn't a single public school that did not increase that number of minimum graduation requirements. So many or all of the school districts actually required more than the 21 hours, and they're allowed to do that. I do not know, and I can't speak with any authority of whether that's true, but my understanding is, if not every public school system, most public school systems actually require more than the minimum that's set by the State Board of Education. Fortunately, the regulation is not very long. So, Madam Chair, if I may, I can just summarize kind of the highlights of what the changes are that the State Board is asking. For years, high school students have had to complete at least 4 units of English language arts. The only difference moving forward will be, instead of communication being something that may be included within the English language arts, it is now going to be a required part of the English language arts, at least for a semester or 0.5 credit. That may be either a standalone communication course, or it may be embedded within a general English language course. That's up to the local school district to decide how they want to handle that curriculum. The 3 units of history and government is not a change. The only change there in the regulation is to update the citation to the regulation in a later thing that I'll talk about, but there's no change to the 3 units of history and government which are required. The course of instruction in Kansas history and government is something that's actually required by legislation. There's a statute that requires that, and so that will remain. There is no change to the 3 units of science. There is no change to the 3 units of mathematics. The first substantial change, for years there has been a requirement that a high school student take a full unit of physical education. And within that physical education, health will be embedded. This now splits physical education into 2 separate courses, physical education being a half credit and health being a health credit. I say being split into 2 courses. The high school may very well still offer the same exact class for a full year, and maybe they have it completely blended throughout the year. They can do that. I don't believe that the intent is to keep that from happening. There's always been the ability that if a parent submits on behalf of a minor child a doctor's note saying that this particular student is unable to complete a physical education course, then that requirement would be waived for that student. There's also been the ability, if the parents objected for religious reasons, what would be taught in the health class, and that's really all it takes, is just a note from the parents that my child is not going to be subject to your health class, that would also be waived. That's still in place. That does not change. We've just split the 2 out. The newest, one of the additions, and I know that this body has been very concerned about or has desired that financial literacy be a required course for all high school students. That will now be a requirement. There's a half unit requirement for financial literacy for high school students now. The 1 unit of fine arts does not change. It's the same thing that it's always been. There is now, and reading the language, it's 1 unit of advanced science, technology, engineering, advanced math, or other similar studies selected by the governing body. This is generically referred to as STEM. These are the STEM courses that we are going to be requiring. Computer sciences, for example, would fit within and be a STEM course. We just call it advanced math or advanced science just because Candidly, it was easier to get that regulatory language written that way rather than trying to redefine what STEM was. But whenever you hear the professional development, if you hear about STEM courses, that's what we're talking about. And Madam Chair, if anybody has questions at any point, I'm happy to stop in the middle. But until you stop me, I'll keep going. There used to be 6 units of elective courses that were required. Now there's only 4.5 electives because that's to make up for the new classes that are going to be required. The total number of 21 doesn't change, by the way. So the state board had the option. They considered requiring additional courses. They decided not to do that and leave that at the discretion of the locally elected school boards. The next requirement are 2 or more accomplishments approved by the state board that demonstrate the pupil will be a successful Kansas high school graduate. That term, or that phrase, pardon me, successful Kansas high school graduate, is a phrase that is already defined within regulation. You may hear, or you may have heard, references to post-secondary assets. That is, again, kind of the generic language that's actually going to be used whenever we're providing professional development, whenever students are hearing about it. But again, rather than trying to recreate the wheel, we've just we describe that as 2 or more accomplishments that are approved by the State Board of Education. That concept, by the way, came, I believe, and I apologize if I get this wrong, my understanding is that was a recommendation from Carnegie Foundation, or one of the other research foundations, said that students are far more successful after high school if they have done something during their high school years other than sitting in a class. And so that is why they want to make that as a minimum requirement.
Yes, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we leave this topic, can you just give me a layperson's example of the type of thing that this regulation contemplates? Maybe it's a service project. I don't know what it is, but just help me understand.
Madam Chair, if I may, you're exactly right. Actually, a service project or client-centered projects, that may very well count. Being a member of a athletic team would count. One of the things, and I have a list here. I will tell you that this is a very fluid list. It's not the definitive list, but these are some of the things that have been mentioned. If you have a youth apprenticeship, if you complete 40 or more community service hours, if you have a client-centered project, if you have workplace learning experience directly related to the individual plan of study, if you are able to obtain an industry-recognized certification, such as if you were to go into a CTE course, if you were to obtain a certification by the time you graduate in welding, that may count as one of these assets. If you are an Eagle Scout or a Gold Scout, that could also be counted. If you have and I in all fairness, I was never a member of 4-H, so I don't know what a 4-H Kansas Key Award is, but if you obtain one of those, that may be considered. Junior ROTC, 2 or more high school athletics or activities. If you have a 90% attendance in high school, which candidly, if you are absent more than 10%, I'm going to screw the terminology up here. I know it's a truancy issue. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of the terminology there. There may be senior projects. There are, if you are able to obtain 9+ college hours, these are all examples of what we're referring to as post-secondary assets.
Thank you. Well, you know, Representative, with the new technology that we have, when an online WebEx committee member indicates by pushing their button on WebEx that they raise their hand, we can now see it in the right-hand corner of that particular monitor. However, the name pops up when the button is first pushed, but then the name disappears and all I see is the hand. So I see a hand is up, and so I apologize if I'm going to have to ask our WebEx.
Madam Chairman, it's me, Senator Tyson.
Senator Tyson, well, there you go. I was going to ask when we got
I was just concerned there might be a pigeon roosting behind me or something.
Yes.
Paranoid, thank you.
Or something worse, right, coming over your back there. So, so sorry for that. And then we will go ahead with the question from Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the testimony. Coincidentally, I was at a robotics club last week, and we were discussing how they could potentially get credits for their class, or for their efforts. So would something like that qualify with what you're talking about?
Madam Chair, yes, I believe something like that would count as an extracurricular activity that would count toward obtaining a post-secondary asset.
Okay, thank you, Madam
I
Chairman.
believe so.
Thank you, and I have a question before we get to Representative Wassinger's question. Well, I have 4 kids. 2 of them have graduated a public Kansas high school, and 2 of them are still in high school, so it's very relevant for what I'm looking at in my personal life. But you have said sports would qualify and sports team. Is it the school sports team, or is it also, because a lot of kids play, for instance, club soccer, they play club volleyball, baseball, gymnastics, all kinds of things?
So there's a couple of things there. I can't give you a definitive answer on that. I think honestly that's something that's going to be decided at the local level, whether or not they will acknowledge. The local school districts are going to know about their individual clubs in that area more so than the state board will. So I think they're going to be given a great deal of latitude on that. I can give you a firm maybe. I don't know for sure. I do know, looking at this list and having the conversations, you know, for example, becoming an Eagle Scout is not something you do in high school. That is outside of the doors, right? But they would still count that as obtaining that asset. So I would imagine, and I can't definitively speak on behalf of the state board, obviously, that if you were to show evidence that you have been a participant of a club team for 4 years, that may very well count as one of these post-secondary assets.
Okay, and there's, you know, charity leagues also and things like that. So if a parent had questions about has their son or daughter met the requirement by that activity, you suggest they do what?
They would talk to their local school district to decide if that activity has been approved by the state board or not.
Okay, thank you. Committee, then we also have a question from Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern with it's a great idea. I think that the board needs to give more parameters to the school districts as to what they think they're able to approve. I do not, I hear a lot of, yeah, I believe that would work. Oh, I believe that would qualify. So I think it needs to be honed down a little bit. It seems a little vague.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any, we see sometimes across the country and other states, do political activities count towards this credit?
That I don't know, and I haven't seen anything on any list I've seen that would necessarily. Now, if you're volunteering, for example, for helping the state get register voters, that may very well count. Whether if you were volunteering for a particular campaign, I don't know. Sorry, I can tell you what the regulatory language is. I can tell you there's been a lot of professional development and information shared about this topic. The state board and KSD talk about this, if not weekly, almost every week.
Well, how would the public then hear about whether it would or wouldn't qualify?
I'm sorry, ma'am, I shouldn't have interrupted you. Here is how this will work. The state board will have, and they have approved some list. They will definitely have a list of activities by the time the regulations go in effect. If there's a school district that comes to the state board and says, hey, we want this to count, we think this is a viable post-secondary asset, they can come to the State Board of Education. The state board will either approve it or not approve it. And once the state board approves that, then that list gets updated for everybody in the state. The schools are going to know what counts as an asset, and the schools can share that information with the parents and the students.
Thank you, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I appreciate what Representative Wassinger says, but I really do subscribe to the theory of local control, and that probably a local school board is in the best position to know what programs, what extracurricular activities, what other opportunities are available in their community. And I would certainly hope that the state board allows those school districts to run their school district based on the needs of their community. Overall, though, I think this is a really, really good idea. I mean, my own anecdotal experience is that an important part of my high school education was things like Boy Scouts, the debate team, a number of other extracurricular activities. And I commend the board for this, this approach to this. So thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you indulging me.
And I can't forget some of the activities my kids participate in too, like DECA and BPA, kind of the business clubs as well. So there's often something for all kinds of kids, for all kids who want to participate in some extracurricular activity. So we just want to make sure, I would think, as policy makers, we're not reviewing policy here today that we can vote up or down, but that we have a look at that for the kids in the schools. So yes, Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I concur with your sentiments for all kids that, you know, want to be involved in some kind of way. Let's make sure that we include them all. Sir, I am heartened by the regulation change that you have here. I notice in here that it says that they have 1/2 unit of financial literacy that's being added in. That is good because when I first got here back in 2021, we had House Bill 2039, I believe it was, where we put in financial literacy, and that was vetoed. So I'm glad to see that they are catching up to the legislature on that piece. However, where it says that physical education is being replaced, a full unit is replaced by 1/2, and 1/2 in classroom, I guess, health education. I know you stated that individual, to Representative Carmichael's point, that the individual local schools can, you know, go back up, I guess, program in a full unit. I'm just curious, how do they come up to the 1/2 unit piece, seeing as we receive reports from the national level that our children are not physically fit or capable, you know, to be assessed into military service, and we're having shortages such that the Department of Defense has to curtail and cut down their numbers. It seems that this would be a little bit counterintuitive to get rid of physical activity.
Madam Chair, what I can share was a comment that Commissioner Watson actually shared with the State Board on, it was Tuesday or Wednesday of this week when I shared the updated language with the State Board. When you ask parents and you ask students, what is the biggest change that you want to see with your graduation requirements? Across the board, students were tired of taking PE because so many of them are already in other activities. They're already on sports teams. Or they just don't get anything out of. I'm not saying we bow down to students don't want to take the gym class, because I wouldn't want to take the math class either, but that's another story. But overall, it was agreed upon by this committee. So, you know, if the local school district, again, they absolutely can still have a full credit of gym. We have no idea if that's going to change at the high school level, but at the minimum level, and the individuals that these probably affect the most are foster students or homeless students, because the law provides that those students, actually their graduation requirements are the 21 hours. So if you've ever been in the custody of the secretary, DCF, or I think it's DCF, pardon me. If you've ever been in the custody, foster care for 24 hours, then if you want to graduate at 21 hours, the law provides you can graduate at 21 hours. I only point that out because the 21-hour minimum, that's really not going to affect 98%, 95% of the students in the state of Kansas. High schools can very well still require a full hour. They can require 2 hours if they want to. But that's how they came up with, and that's why it was split between a half credit for PE and a half credit for health, because they wanted to focus, I believe, they wanted that increased focus on health studies. So that's where they came up with that. That's my understanding.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the follow-up. And as someone who was in custody, not of the Kansas DCF, but in Florida, coming up through foster care, I will tell you from my own lived experience that what you say has a kernel of truth. foster kids usually don't, because of their circumstances, have the opportunity to get involved in after-school clubs, programs, sports, and things of that nature. There is a cost-prohibitive nature to supplies and uniforms and all of those types of things that are not provided to the foster parent or they come out of pocket for it. The state doesn't provide for that. So those children don't necessarily get physical application time. Therefore, I would, again, as the chair stated, we're not voting anything up and down, but I would like to note that I don't see this as something that's good for kids across the board. I would encourage, if we're going to leave it at the local level, for everyone to, as you said, program in 2 hours, because physical activity is something that we're seeing a problem with in the health and concerns of our children, especially our foster children, as you stated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and just want to clarify that I don't mean all activities would be qualifying for that, but just stating the parameters, that someone's got to set parameters, whether it's the local board or the Department of Education. So are there other questions? Not seeing any. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next addition, and I'm going to try to summarize this rather than go word for word on the FAFSA. And many states have started to require this of high school students, and I will tell you, I may have borrowed this language from other states, which is to say I absolutely stole it from other states. The status quo will be, the assumption will be, high school student, it will be required to apply for federal student aid for post-secondary education. They don't have to take it. They don't have to go to college. They just have to fill out the form, because Kansas has apparently left millions of dollars of what would, maybe not millions, but a lot of financial aid, because they probably didn't, the assumption is they didn't know that it was available for these particular students. So they are required to fill out the form, unless the parents of a minor child say, we're not filling it out, or if the student is 18 years or older, can say, I know what the FAFSA is, I'm not filling it out, pardon me. Or in circumstances where the superintendent or whoever the head is of that particular school system, if it's a private school system, if they know about this particular student's circumstances, and they know that maybe the parents are not going to be available to fill out this waiver on their behalf. You know, they've tried the best efforts, and there's just not, that communication's not working. For whatever reason, then that chief administrative officer of that school district can say, you don't have to fill it out. And Madam Chair, the FAFSA, for those that are curious, I started filling it out again last week, just for fun, because I was curious, because my student loans are gone finally. It's all online now, and it is actually extremely easy. I think the second question you fill out is, I'm going to apply, but I'm not going to give you any of my information, and I know that this makes me only eligible for the unsubsidized loans. And that's it. That's basically what it takes to fill out the FAFSA. Now, unfortunately, if you go that route, you're going to get the most expensive loans, and you won't be eligible for Pell Grants or anything else. But that option is available on the online system. And I imagine there may be questions about that, so I'll
Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do like that requirement, actually, because most parents don't know about it. And when they know about it, I know you said it's easy, but it's so hard. And when I had to do it for my kids, it was painstakingly hard, because the language, you assume, we can read it, but that doesn't mean we understand all the words that we are reading. So I'm glad it's required, because I think something like this gives parents some way to know there's something else out there that they can fill out. And hopefully with this, there's some kind of assistance. Like I said, you can't just sit at home and do it. A lot of people, like I said, even for a well-educated, college-educated person, it's sometimes very difficult to read through all of that and fill out a complete form. So is there assistance in the process if it's required? I mean, there's an opt-out, but if it's required, is there somebody to help them with that?
I don't know that there's going to be anyone specifically at the agency that will provide that. I would assume that there's going to be, I'm going to get in big trouble for saying this. I'll just say there are staff at most school districts that help students with career choices, helping them to know what's going to happen when they leave high school. Those individuals probably are going to be the best suited to help them fill out the FAFSA if they need assistance to do that.
Because it is a barrier. Sorry, I have one more question on that. Because sometimes it becomes a barrier because it is so overwhelming that they don't want to fill it out. And they may not even think it's an option because, for whatever reason, it may be implied that they're not going to be a product that would go on to a university or something of that sort. So hopefully, school districts figure out a way to assist, whether it's an after-school assistance or whatever that might look like. Because if something is required, they can't just do it at home. You know, I don't know how you would provide that service with the word required. So thank you.
Thank you. Committee, other questions on that issue? Is there something similar for, well, would this sort of application apply, for instance, to trade schools?
If the trade school accepts, if they are eligible to accept federal student aid, then they would. And keep in mind, that would be up to, that's the U.S. Department of Education deciding whether the money can be used for trade schools or not. And I don't know the extent of, I don't know what schools would be eligible for that.
Well, just to make sure then, is there going to be a requirement that people look into an application for the funds for trade schools? I mean, it seems to be we're pushing all of the kids then in one direction with this requirement. I know it's opt-out, but.
There's nothing parallel to this that I'm aware of. This is the requirement that the state board is going to be requesting. And I'm not saying.
And the FAFSA you're describing is different than when our family looked last at it, but that it's only the second question and then you're done, but interesting. So it was, because it was a rather cumbersome, lengthy, very detailed questions about family in the FAFSA. And then, so would the school district then be getting the information, or just, what, a certification from the parent that, yes, we filled it out, or how does that work? So you either have to do one of the following filings, the free application, and then how would the school know that you filled it out, or the school would know that you've opted out?
So the school's going to know you opted out because you opt out with the school. So that's how they're tracking that. Right.
And are we sure we want the schools to be having that information about what families are choosing for their post-secondary education, if any?
I apologize, Madam Chair. The only information that's going to be shared with the school district is, here's evidence, whether it's an email or a screenshot at the very end, that you have completed your FAFSA.
Well, I know. The school district will know whether you've completed it or you haven't, is my point.
That's all they're going to know. They will not.
Well, that is new information that our school districts will be collecting then with this requirement.
That is correct.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciated your comment about the technical schools. And one suggestion we could make is that the State Board of Education consider adding another option, which would be on a form created by the state board, an indication that the student is planning to attend a technical school or college in this state.
Well, it's more gathering of information by our schools, whether it's technical or four-year university. So it's just kind of something new that's been presented. And so anyway, just kind of thinking here out loud. But yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That does not address your concern about the information. It does address your concern that there should be an alternative for technical schools.
Correct. Kind of, well, if we're going to do this, then we also maybe want to include that as well. So yes, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make sure that I understand this. What the school district will know is that the form has been completed, but they won't know what's on the form. They will not have possession of the financial information, et cetera. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And so to the extent that there are privacy concerns that the school superintendent or principal might know how much my daddy makes or those sorts of things, that information is not available to the district under this regulation or this scheme. Is that generally correct?
That is absolutely correct. And I will tell you in all candor, I've said many times when we talk about this, we do not want to collect that information about the FAFSA, and the schools better not be collecting it either.
And I agree with that. Now, on the other hand, if for some reason the student or his or her family are opting out of filling out the form at all, the school district would know that because they're the entity that issues the waiver. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But again, they would not have access to any confidential financial information concerning the family or the student. All they're doing is seeing if there's grounds or justification or reason to waive the filing requirement. Am I on track? If not, straighten me out.
I think I understand your question. And there's not going to be a question on any form, I'm just presuming it because I may have to help write it. There will not be a question on any form that says, well, why are you waiving this?
Right.
It's not going to be on there. That's none of our business. That's not our concern. If the parents sign a form that says, I understand what the FAFSA is, and I know that my child may be eligible for financial aid, but we choose not to apply for it at this time, signed parent. That should be it.
That makes a lot of sense to me, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I'm curious why a school district would feel it's their obligation, which would be kind of what this whole requirement implies, to make sure that a parent is aware of it or not, and of the FAFSA, I suppose. And it is additional information about whether a family is going to be filling out the FAFSA or not, which currently our school districts do not collect. And that's, you're nodding your head, yes, but it's not seen on camera, but.
Madam Chair, I could very well still fill out the FAFSA on behalf of my child and apply for financial aid or have them apply for aid and still tell the school district, I'm not filling out this form and I'm not giving you any information about whether I've filled out FAFSA or not. You could, I don't know why you would, but you could do that. If you're a parent and you don't want the school district to know that you've applied for financial aid, no one's going to be checking that. You could very well sign a form that says, yes, I'm not going to apply for student aid, and then a month later, or maybe a month earlier, you've turned around and you do apply for student aid. You could do that. I don't know why you would, but.
So the form's not going to ask for the parent to sign certifying that, certifying anything, or what's the form going to say, I suppose?
I do not anticipate the form requiring a notary or any other kind of certification that I swear under oath that I'm never going to apply for student aid for my child. I don't see that happening.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you're kind of striking on what my question was, what's the why? And I don't mean the why as you want to get this information, screenshot, whatever the case is, I get that. But I guess my question, sir, goes more towards, if you don't have this particular step implemented, right now, the school board, state board, they can get this information from the feds detailing whether or not, and this is what generates this entire discussion, right? Is because they already have a list coming down of who has not applied for FAFSA and that there are all these dollars still sitting here that have not been applied for. So the state board can already go and find out who has applied because it's already registered, via checklist that I received back in school when I applied. They said I made too much money because I had a $963 job working at Bojangles. Yeah, go figure that, got denied. But this information is already available. It's that the state board is trying to go to the source and skip a step. And then my other question, sir, is what do they get because of this? Is there like some extra money or something associated with it to implement this particular step? What's the purpose of this?
Madam Chair, if I may, I'll start at the end first because I think that may be the easier answer. The purpose of this is to make sure there's a mechanism in place to inform families that this is a form that they can fill out, that they are not obligated to accept any money that's offered, and to let them know, hey, this is a thing that could help your child out. So that's the why.
I'm so sorry, let me interrupt, sir. We already have that. A guidance counselor can already send this out. The school can already send this out to the parents in the school district to say, hey, it's FAFSA season. You have a junior or a senior that needs to apply, here's the stuff. I know that already comes out. Why is it that the parents have to sign off on an affidavit or something, do a screenshot, and send that back in, or to a student that is at least 18 years old or legally emancipated? Why do they have to do that data call and have that data stored as an extra step when that is already standard procedure?
So that may lead into the first half of your question, and Representative, I'm not aware of any authority for the state board to receive any information about a student, whether they have ever applied for student aid. We don't have that data. No, I'm sorry, unless the parents were to sign off and say, yes, I want you to inform the State Board of Education that I have applied for student aid. I don't know that to be, I've never heard of that ever being available for a state agency. The school might know, but there's no reason to assume that we're going to know, and I don't think we've ever asked for it. I don't know why we would.
Madam Chair, I don't mean to contend. I want to clarify. What I'm saying is that the information is already reposited with the feds. And if the school or the state board or anyone wanted to pull that information down and see if either quantity or by name of who has applied by the parent or by the student's social security number, they can already get that roll up. So I don't understand why we have to add this additional step is what my question is.
And Madam Chair, I don't mean to belabor the point. We don't collect any student social security numbers. We don't have them. And I, again, don't know that I've never heard of being able to go and pull down a student's, a parent has to inform, say, yes, these are the people that are authorized to have access to the fact that I filled out a FAFSA. Like I said, in all of the data requests and all the data discussions we've had, no one has ever suggested that we could pull that from. I don't know that that's actually something we could pull. The university might be able to pull that down if the student or the parents say, yes, I want you to share this information. I don't think the Department of Education and the State Board are on that list that we would have access. It's not something somebody can just randomly go out there and find, and the State Board can't either. The question was, if I understand it, Madam Chair, why are we doing this? The reason is to ensure that the parents are getting this opportunity, and more importantly, the students are getting the opportunity to ensure they have this opportunity to fill it out to ask for student aid. That's why they're doing it.
It sounds like maybe a policy decision, but, and I think you said this Board of Education for the state doesn't have a student's social security number, but I think the local school district does. So
I'm sure local school districts have them, but I can assure you in our kids' system, because we have this conversation all the time, do not give us children's social security numbers. We don't want them.
Representative Wassinger. Representative, we can't hear you.
Information about that, just like.
Hold on a second. Representative Wassinger, could you start over? We couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now, Madam Chair?
Yes, we can. And I think your feed into us is lagging a little bit. So just be aware of that. It's a little slow, but thank you.
Okay, I apologize. I'm on the road. I am very much against this. It's just one more way to track data from high school students and their families. And I can see this going much farther than what you say that it's going to. And I respectfully request that you get to the board and tell them we don't want you to do it. I just don't see why you feel like you have to do this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And sir, again, I don't mean to be contentious. You're just here giving us information, so I appreciate that. I just sense something that is amiss here. As we say in the Army, something in the Kool-Aid ain't sweet, okay? For this information to already be available, but to have the parents or the student or however you want to look at it have to, you know, supply it at the house level. I guess my question, something that's going with me here right now is, if the impact of this would be if a student or family decided that they did not want to apply for the FAFSA, because on the onset it looks like, hey, like you said, we just want to ensure that they know that this is available and that they, you know, have a deadline to apply for it, and they haven't done it. Would this be utilized, this information? Would it be utilized against that same family should they apply for something else on state aid or another type of support? Because would they predicate it and say, hey, look, you've refused to apply for the FAFSA, therefore you're blocked out from any other type of funding or whatever the case is. What is the impact of this?
Madam Chair, I cannot, no, I can't imagine how that would ever be used or why that would ever be used against someone to be eligible for other aid of any sort. They're not, no other state agency is going to get access to the information unless it's an aggregate, because it would still be considered student data. We certainly, again, we don't want the results of the FAFSA. We don't want the FAFSA application. All we need them to track is, and frankly, if it's 5 years down the road and it turns out that 90% of the parents are saying, I'm not going to apply for this, or I'm not going to tell you about it, that's probably a pretty good sign that we need to take that requirement away. I don't believe the state board anticipates that to be the case. That being said, no, I mean, there's no curtain that I'm hiding behind. We're just telling parents, and we're requiring the schools to apply for the aid or tell us you don't want to apply for it.
And Madam Chair, I'll relent with this. Like you said, sir, and as the chair was discussing before, the loophole is there, okay? Somebody can say to you that they will or will not do this, and then they go back and do another thing. Therefore, it is impotent. It has no teeth. Therefore, there's no need to have it in the first place. You don't need to go 5 years and collect data on that to see that is already unnecessary. I would agree with the vice chair. Go back to the board and tell them to take this one out. Thanks.
Thank you. And just to follow up for a moment, like I said, I have 4 children, and so if this had been in place for the first one, then I've got 3 other kids who are following along with that same school, and so I find it curious that my local school board needs to know my yes or no whether I'm filling out the FAFSA, and which is a federal document, and why the state would need to know about that. And again, even the no says something. It's another piece of information that is being talked about and being collected about families, and it's then, you know, do we want to, does it lead to an obligation then later on, if this were to become a regulation that's adopted, that the school district then has to, you know, has an obligation to follow up and make sure that the application is filled out? And I would think that most families, if they were looking at this regulation, wouldn't, you know, you want to be truthful and forthcoming, and so they probably wouldn't consider that an option, what you had just said earlier, that tell them no and then go do the opposite. So it's a very curious position that the Department of Education, the board, I suppose, not the department, but the board is, actually it is the department, that the department is suggesting that families do that. So again, and it's just curious about the collecting of the information, because I believe that at least our experience and talking with other parents is that there, like the representative said, there are school counselors that are making kids and families well aware of the opportunity for this, and to make it a state requirement is quite an interesting policy decision for the department. But thank you. And we had then a question from Representative Carmichael, then Senator Reddy, then Senator Francisco. Thank you, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With all due respect, I could not disagree more with my colleagues. At the outset of the conferee's testimony, he explained to us that the motivation for this regulation, or proposed regulation, is that millions of dollars in federal funding in particular that could go to benefit Kansas kids in furthering their post-high school education is in essence going unused because, for whatever reason, the application for financial aid is not being completed. It makes absolutely good sense for all of us to obtain as much support for post-high school education as we can. This proposed regulation invades no one's privacy. If a family, for whatever reason, doesn't want to provide that financial information, not to the local school district, not to the Board of Education, but rather on the financial aid application itself, then they simply check the box and say, we choose not to, sign their name. The kid takes it back. It's checked off on the graduation requirement, and it's done. If, on the other hand, it inspires 10% of the families that would not otherwise complete the application to go ahead and fill out the application, and all of a sudden their kids are now able to obtain post-secondary financial benefits and can go on to something after high school, that's a wonderful outcome. Now, if it was required that families complete the form, I'd oppose it, because I don't think we should require anybody to send their financial information to the federal government, except maybe when filing their tax return. But to deny Kansas kids the opportunity to have financial support for post-high school education because somebody didn't know to fill out the form, it fell through the cracks, the family wasn't motivated, that's not a good outcome for Kansas. It's not a good outcome for Kansas. So contrary to the advice of some of my colleagues, I encourage you to report back to the board that this is an excellent regulation and that at least this member encourages its adoption. Thank you for hearing me out, Madam Chair.
It's kind of interesting, the discussion, which is, quite varied here today. You can see that maybe this is a policy decision that should come before the legislature. Quite varied. And somebody's microphone is on WebEx, but I think, okay, great. But we have that figured out. And so before we get to the next question, what about the child who, as we heard in the last questioning, turns in the form from their parent, and the form says no, and then the child with the parent later is going to, yes, fill out the form? What kind of message does that encourage for our kids to be hearing?
Madam Chair, to be candid, that was an answer that I gave you as to, are we swearing people in when they say they're not filling out the form? No, we're not. I'm not saying we are going to encourage anyone to do that.
But it was the suggestion here today.
It was a comment that I made, that is true. And if someone turns around and changes their mind the week after the form gets filled out, well, they can certainly do that too. I don't believe there's any intent to say, well, whatever you choose today and you give the school district, you're stuck by that. I don't believe that's the intent at all.
But could be, like the other representative said, what are the unintended consequences of this kind of regulation? Maybe that would be one of them. Or has the department looked at maybe, schools can have an assembly. Hey, it's, post-education or post-secondary education information day, and then you have, for the seniors, or the juniors, because you want to fill it out, or for the juniors and the seniors to fill this out and educate the kids, and parents come as well. So just some other thinking as we're looking at with the intention here, and I do appreciate our kids have had good opportunities at our public schools, and we appreciate that. It's just, again, this is new information. Even the no is new information for our schools to be collecting that they didn't have before this regulation, even the no. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You named off at the beginning of this conversation the individuals that were at the table while making these suggestions or recommendations, and they seem to be professionals in the area of education in one way or the other. So I think the intent may have been wanting kids to be as successful as possible and giving them information towards that success. And sometimes people behave differently when the word required is there, where you have to be required to do 1 hour of phys ed, 4 hours or science are required to go to college. So these are things that are required. I think when we put required there, there's a lot of individuals that are first generation that really don't know how to get to college, what comes next, what do I do, and overwhelmed with options or just not knowing, and wanting to be good parents, wanting to be good guardians, but they just don't know. And you leave it up to your 18-year-old to figure out, who's also navigating their own sphere on how to handle things after high school. And I think when we put required, it opens up some pathways for either guidance counselors to step up their game, let's say in this instance, to make sure they are touching base with students, because not all guidance counselors behave the same way. They have 400 students, let's say, some of them, and only 2 guidance counselors. So it's hard for them to say, you have the option to come out and fill this out if you want. Most kids are going to opt out because they'd rather do other stuff. So I think this just gives an indicator, like, we believe here's an opportunity to further your education, and here's something that might help you get there, because we understand cost can be overwhelming, and we will help you through that process. If you don't want to do this, this is fine, but this is some way that we're looking at it. So I think, we are fortunate to know how things work in applications and what comes next after college or after high school. But there are a lot of kids and parents that are just out there to figure it out on their own. And I think that's I have to think that was the understanding for the recommendation. And that's why I support it. I'm an immigrant from India. We had no idea. And so I had to figure it out with other parents that may have known and figure out what to do with things. And even after I had my own kids, I still had no idea because it's so overwhelming. So I think the intent is different. I'm not sure it's ill-intended. And maybe we can figure out a way so it's not manipulated, or we don't have access to certain data points or whatever it might be, or certain metrics. But I hope we are keeping track of how many people are having access to FAFSA points, and how many people are we helping out to get to their higher education and figure out what they want to do with their future. So I see this as a pathway to their future. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we entertain next questions, I want to clear up that this is the Kansas State Department of Education. This has not been brought forward by the Board of Education of Kansas. That's correct?
I was waiting for this question to come up one of these days. So I know that they are published under the Department of Education, but we do so only under the authority and the guidance of the State Board of Education. So it is the State
Board has voted on this?
So the board has voted to authorize us to bring they've seen them. They voted once to bring them through the formal adoption process, and it will be the state board that actually votes to adopt them in May.
Or not adopt them?
Or not adopt them in May, that's true.
But it was suggested by the elected Board of Education?
That is correct.
Thank you. Next, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so I'm straight on this, I understood that you said that the school will only know if the process was done, not whether the form was filled out or the form was not filled out.
They're either going to find out verification
Basically, the three options are this, right, I think. I filled out the form. I'm not going to fill out the form, even though you've told me what it is. My parents say I don't have to fill it out. Or neither of those things, and it's an understanding and there's a reason for the state superintendent to say, pardon me, not the state superintendent, we don't have one of those anymore, the school superintendent to say, look, I get it, I'm not going to stop you from graduating just because you are 17 years old and I don't have any communication from your parents. So those are basically the three options.
But the school wouldn't know if you filled out the form whether you checked, I'm not going any farther, or I have completed all this information.
That is correct.
So in that case, it would be more difficult to see how there would be any repercussions because the school wouldn't know whether you filled it out or not. So in the case of additional aid, if you hadn't applied for it, no one would know. So it could not be established as a criteria in any other follow-up concern. So thank you.
But the school will know because you filled out the form and it said no.
And Madam Chair, that was my question. I think that the school's not going to know whether you said no, or, I mean, whether you checked the first box or whether you filled out the whole form. They're just going to know you went in and did one or the other of those two things. So I think they're not going to know that you decided to check that first box or if you decided to fill all the information in. And in that case, they wouldn't know. Does that make sense?
But the family will be perceived one way or the other. The family will be perceived either as having filled out the form because you said it would be a screenshot showing that you have indeed done it, or it will be reported as a no, and that creates a perception about a family as well.
And if I may clarify, and I don't know that I'm giving you any better answers. The screenshot was a suggestion. The schools are going to have to decide how they're going to find out this information. I know that when you finish this, one way or the other, at least it used to be, that when you finish, just like you fill out any form, you apply for anything online, you order lunch from the pennant. Thank you for your order. I mean, that would be verification that you have done what you needed to do. It doesn't tell you what was put in the fast food. It doesn't tell you whether
I understand all that. It's just the yes or the no. And so perhaps a suggestion for the form would be, why not the form, instead of it being a waiver, why not the form include both the yes and the no? And you just simply, as the family, return the form and either, yes, I did, or no, I'm not going to. And then rather than the screenshot of, here it is, I've filled it out. So this is clearly a policy debate. This isn't the forum to have the debate, though we have been having the discussion and the questions. So appreciate the questions. We do kind of need to keep on track with time. And again, perhaps because we have had some robust questions, and we're going to get to all the questions before we move on, but just want to remind the committee and those following along in the public that it's not really debate because, again, this committee has no legislative authority to reject, adopt, amend, approve what is brought before this committee today. It's just for comment. And so I think we've heard the comment that this is a great idea, go ahead and proceed. We've heard the comment, this is a terrible idea, please ask the board to reject this. Some middle ground that, well, perhaps if you're going to create a form that it has both options on it, yes and no. And, but I think all of that discussion shows that this is a policy debate that the legislature would be interested in, since we're hearing both sides, though this is not a debate. And so, maybe that's a suggestion too, that we will get at the end of our meeting today, what we want to put in our report, that this is policy, and it is the legislature's authority and duty to create policy, so. With that comment, thank you, Body, for letting me have some extra time to say that. And then we will hear next from Representative Wynn, then Representative Sawyer. Representative Wynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just end up with saying that I consider it positive and awareness that students have options And that's the only, that's a very heavy weight in itself for some students who have no guidance counselors who say you have an option for post-secondary. So I'm good with it. I believe I believe the state board has that self-executing power as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, I just agree with the last representative from Wyandotte County. I agree with her comments. She stated it well.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir, you may proceed.
And for what it's worth, if I may, Madam Chair, I appreciate the comment at the idea of having the form saying yes or no. That's probably what we'll end up doing. That makes sense to me. So, moving on. As always, at least 21 units of credit shall be required for graduation. That's not a change. We did clarify that a unit may only satisfy one graduation requirement at a time. As a former, debate kid, that if I could have taken 18 credits of forensics to graduate, I would have. But apparently, the state board disagrees with me. And if I wanted forensics to count as my English language arts course, then I have to take that 1 year. And if I wanted to count as my creative arts, or pardon me, fine arts, then I would have to take that a second year. I don't get to cross both of them off at the same time. That's what that clarification was intended for. And as I've said many times before, there's no change that a governing body may increase the number of units required for graduation. What has been, it's not really an addition because we had this in another section of the regulation, but it fit more appropriately here. The governing body may waive the requirement for a course in instruction in Kansas history for any student who transfers into the district at a graded level above which that course is taught. For example, if you have a required freshman history and civics course, and that is the class in which the Kansas history is taught, but then you have a student transfer in their junior or senior year, if the high school or the district does not want to require that student to take the freshman level class that maybe they've already taken outside of Kansas, but it wasn't Kansas specific, they could waive that requirement and say, okay, we're not going to make you take an extra history and civics course for those purposes. That was authorized by statute, and that's the same language we've always had. We just had to move it here. That's why it's underlined. And the last part is the same thing that's always been there. The graduation requirements specified in this regulation, if the state board does approve them, will go into effect for the freshmen entering in the fall. 24-25 will be the first freshman class that these graduation requirements would apply to.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none. Well, Mr. Gordon, thank you very much for appearing today. You have answered a lot of questions from the committee who had thoughts on both sides of the issue. So again, possibly suggesting that this is a policy decision to be brought before the legislature in front of a standing committee rather than a joint committee. But thank you very much for appearing today, Mr. Gordon. We appreciate it, and your testimony as well. Committee, we are quite a bit behind, but want to make sure that our staff is doing okay. And do they need a 5-minute break before we proceed? And what about the committee? So, well, I think the staff is working pretty hard too, sir. So, committee, do you want to take let's try to make it a 3 or 4 minute break. So, let's try to, we'll stand at ease and be back at about 10:50
Madam Chairman?
if we can. Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that, but it was brought to my attention that they have attempted to do this before between with the Education Budget Committee 2 years ago. So if you could get, he may have left the room already, but.
Oh, he did.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I would like to have gotten clarification on that if that's accurate. So they did attempt to go through legislation and didn't succeed is what I've been told. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for the question, Senator, and we're going to have the reviser and research look into that, and maybe we'll have a response while we're still in meeting today. So with that then, about a 5-minute break till 10:50, we'll be standing at ease. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the short break, and we are quite a bit ways behind now. I think we only have the room till noon today, so want to make sure that we're able to wrap things up in a timely manner. So next, then, we will hear from the Secretary of State, and we will be hearing from Brian Caskey, Director of Elections. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chair Warren and members of the committee. Again, my name is Brian Caskey. I'm the Director of Elections for the Secretary of State's office, representing Secretary of State Scott Schwab. We are bringing before you today 18 amended election regulations. We have been working on these 18 since the middle of 2023 for a variety of reasons. The first one is some of these have changes that are in response to laws that were passed in the 2022 and 2023 legislative sessions. Some of these are because of legislative post-audit findings that took place in 2023. We have received input from various legislators over the last few years. We've incorporated that input. We have received input from county election officers across the state, so we have incorporated their input into some of these regulations. And then just our own experience and best practices both in Kansas and in other states to improve some of our regulatory process. So these amendments were first submitted to the Department of Administration and the AG's office in August of 23. All have received approval for form and legality in late February. Their public hearing has been noticed in the Kansas Register. The public hearing is set for May 7th, 2024 at 1 p.m. in the first floor conference room of the Secretary of State's office. The address is 120 Southwest 10th Avenue. Written comments can be submitted to the following email address, clay.barker2, that's the number 2, clay.barker2@ks.gov. And all of these proposed regulations are on the Secretary of State's website at sos.ks.gov. So the 18 amended regulations generally fall into 4 categories. And with my testimony, you should have a copy of a table that outlines what the 4 categories are. The first 2 have to deal with security enhancements for both physical security and cybersecurity of the election process and equipment. These amendments would require counties to just meet new and enhanced physical and cybersecurity standards. To offset the cost of these requirements, the Secretary of State's office has created a grant program using federal HAVA funds to reimburse counties for up to 90% of their physical security grant, for their physical security implementation costs. So we are in the process of reimbursing counties for those costs currently. And about $1.9 million will be used for that grant, with 84 counties participating. That's what the first 2 regulations are dealing with. There are 3 regulations that have process changes.
And Mr. Caskey, as you go along, could you state the number of the regulations that you're talking about too? So the first 2 you talked about, if you'll just state what those regulation numbers are.
Absolutely. And of course, anyone can interrupt me at any time. So the first 2 regulations with the security enhancements are KAR 7-21-1 and 7-21-2, storage of voting equipment and voting equipment security. The second group of 3 have to deal with process changes on post-election audits, chain of custody requirements, and ensuring procedures that prevent anyone from trying to vote both by mail and on election day in the same election. Those 3 regulations are 7-47-1, dealing with post-election audits, 7-24-2, dealing with chain of custody, and 7-36-6, dealing with advanced voting lists. Then there are 9 regulations that we are simply updating language to make more current with today's processes and implementations. There are 9 different regulations dealing with the definition of direct expenses versus indirect expenses and determining costs, clarifying the rules regarding people who are registering people to vote, and just a handful of other just small tweaks to current laws. Again, there's 9 regulations. I can read them to you. They're also all listed on the chart, so whatever the chair prefers on that. And then the last section, there are 4 regulations where we are simply changing the format. There is a certification that has a picture of it in the current regulation, and we are changing the picture to words to make it easier to have those certifications printed by the county election officers. So those are the broad outlines of what we are attempting to accomplish. I'm happy to answer any questions or go into further detail on any of the 18.
Thank you. Committee questions? Not seeing any, then if you have talked through all of your regulations, the 18 of them, then, and you've also indicated where the public can make comment for the hearing that's coming up, and is that also where they can sign up if they want to provide in-person comments?
Yes, it's the same address, clay.barker2@sos.ks.gov. So if you want to offer comment, that's the email address. If you want to sign up to testify or to provide comment orally, also the same email address.
And the regulations you said are also on the website at sos.ks.gov.
Yes, all 18 are on our website currently.
Okay, and SOS stands for Secretary of State, not any other known acronym, so.
Correct.
Secretary of State, so, yes, okay, well then, committee, if there are no questions, then thank you, Mr. Caskey, for being here today and for the testimony you have provided.
Absolutely, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Francisco.
I was happy to show up at the meeting today with my I voted sticker because I voted at 8 a.m.
Thank you very much.
On your way in before you came in.
And if I could take a point of personal privilege, thank you, Senator, and remind everyone there is a statewide presidential preference primary on Tuesday. Don't forget to vote. So please vote on Tuesday.
And advanced polling places then are open if Senator Francisco went to one today.
I assume that that's a decision made by each county?
Each county does offer in-person voting. Today, it is optional tomorrow, so you need to check with your county tomorrow. Every county does have in-person voting from 8 a.m. till 12 p.m. on Monday. And then polls open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday.
And for, I happen to represent part of Johnson County. Is there, could you tell us the website for any of my constituents who would want to go and look to see?
I do not have the Johnson County website memorized off the top of my head.
I think it's, well, I don't want to guess because I've been to it, but if I say a wrong website, then people are directed to a wrong spot. So maybe before we're concluded today, we can get that info. I think I have it right, but. Okay, any other questions then? Go ahead, Ms. Shelley.
Jill Shelley, Legislative Research, www.jocoelection.org.
Okay, great. I think I would have put an S on there. I don't know, JOCO Elections, but jocoelectionoffice.org. Or, nope, it's because I'm thinking JOCO Election Office, but that's not part of the name, so jocoelection.org. Okay, great, thank you. Committee, if there are no other questions then, thank you very much for appearing here today and for the testimony you have provided. Next, we will hear from the Kansas Department of Revenue, Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control, Taylor Murray. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Taylor Murray. I'm with the Office of Policy and Research with the Department of Revenue. I'd like to thank the committee for its consideration of these regulations today. And I'm here today for regulations of the department's Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control, or ABC for short. I've got ABC Director Debbie Beavers and some of her staff available today if we get into the substance of these areas. So the department proposes revoking 3 ABC regulations. That's KAR 14710, 14711, and 14712, using the expedited revocation procedure in KSA 77-426 subsection D. These are 3 regulations that ABC identified as unnecessary in the report that's sometimes referred to as the House Bill 2087 report that was submitted last year. That's the review and report process for all regulations that's mandated in KSA 77-440. So these three regulations have been identified as a duplicating existing statute. The regulations relate to beer distributors' geographic territories. And again, we determined they are unnecessary because they only duplicate requirements in KSA 41-307, 41-410, and 41-701. So pursuant to KSA 77-426 subsection D, that's that expedited revocation process. The public has a right to make a written request for a hearing on these regulations. So we published a notice of that right to request a hearing in the Kansas Register on March 7th. As of this morning, we haven't received any requests. The email address is going to be my email address if somebody wants to request that public hearing, which would be taylor.murray@ks.gov. And I'm happy to stand for any questions on these.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here today, sir. And Director Beavers, good to see you again as well. Just to be clear, because I only have this sheet right here, and I don't know, I know you said which ones these are duplicative of, and you wanted to get rid of them on the expedited process, track and all that. When it comes to geographic territory, beer distribution, our tiered system, does this cause any conflict inside the community? For the members, can you elucidate a little bit on that? Because I know that there's a very precarious setup that we have inside of the industry. So does any of this revocation cause any kerfluffles across the board?
Right. And Madam Chair, I can say that because the regulation duplicates the statute, it's not going to be any change to get rid of this. Right now, the statute is what's controlling because it's the same, it says the same thing, right? So there won't be any change. I might defer to Director Beavers just to address, it seems like maybe you have some questions or concerns about situations that are currently happening in statute. Is that right?
I think one of, okay. Go ahead, please introduce yourself.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Debbie Beavers, ABC Director. And just to expound upon that, these regulations are already in statute. The statute's controlling, so it's just duplicative. So we just feel it's best to revoke those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, other questions? Not seeing any, then thank you very much for your testimony today and appearing in committee with us here today. Appreciate it. Thank you. And committee, well, we must have been ready to wrap up our work because after some discussion, then we are at the end of our agenda for requesting testimony on departments and agencies who have submitted rules and regulations before the committee today. So with that, then, we will turn to committee discussion and comments on the proposed rules and regulations. And we'll just go in order that we heard them today. And just want to overall make a comment that some of these departments and agencies, we see bills and legislation on very often, and so we hear those in the legislature, and we can always take a look at them through legislation as well. And you saw through the discussion, I think that would apply to all of our departments and agencies, that it's the legislature's prerogative to set policy, and we ask departments and agencies to make rules and regulations. So that's kind of the role we play. So with that, then, are there comments or discussion and any report information you would like to include in the report regarding the Department of Labor Division of Workers' Compensation regulations we heard? Not seeing any. How about for the State Board of Mortuary Arts? Not seeing any. Kansas Department of Health and Environment? Not seeing any. Kansas State Department of Education. Not seeing any. Secretary of State. Not seeing any. Kansas Department of Revenue, Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control. Not seeing any. And perhaps for the public following along, again, the body here doesn't have authority to approve, adopt, reject, amend the regulations before us. So it's the role of the committee then. So do we have our calendars with us? Because we will like to suggest another meeting date. And we're going to suggest Monday, April 29th. That's the date that, excuse me, veto session begins according to the session planner. We anticipate as a committee several notices of hearings in mid-May to be published very soon. And you heard when we have our conferees from the departments testify, well, here's when the public hearing is. Part of the process is that they have to provide notice of those hearings, and when we get those notices, when the joint committee gets them in, then part of our process is for us to schedule this hearing before the public comment hearing. So we're anticipating some more of those are being scheduled. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding is that the Senate, at least, will be in session pro forma on the 25th and 26th. And then actually on the 29th, the session starts. So would we be asking this committee to meet when the Senate session has started meeting, if we meet at 10 a.m. that morning? Or would the Thursday or Friday the week before when we're in session, but I'm guessing that's conference committee. And the other question would be if anyone on this committee is also on appropriations, because I'm guessing they would be meeting that Thursday and Friday.
So is the suggestion that we meet April 25th or April 26th?
That is the suggestion. Although we could certainly ask leadership when they're planning to start the session on the 29th. But I think it would be confusing to try to start a session and have this committee meeting at the same time.
Well, let's keep in mind that we have the April 25th discussion, we have the April 26th discussion, and the April 29th discussion. And then I think we can look at our calendars. We'll have an opportunity to talk with leadership as well to see what will be least disruptive for the regular order of business of the legislature and see what makes most sense. So if you could just all keep in mind kind of a little bit of a maybe save the date, April 25th, April 26th, maybe April 29th. And we'll communicate then and hear what's going to work out best for the legislature. Is there any other asking staff business before the committee that we need to take up? I see we're at the end of our agenda, so with that then, want to thank everyone for their attention, from the committee members, for the conferees, for their appearance and testimony today, for staff who works hard to get us the information ahead of time and for keep us running smoothly today and after, and also to those following along in the committee meeting room and or online. So thank you very much. And with that then, committee, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair.